This Texas school might have found a faster way. This is Byron. He and his classmates complete all of their academic work in just 2 hours a day, yet place in the top 2% on standardized tests.
This is Alpha School, where teachers are considered guides and students study for only 2 hours a day, and supposedly they're learning twice as fast.
There's a private school in Texas that has received quite a bit of press and attention about the use of AI in the classroom. So let's dive in. What is Alpha School? So in 2013, Mackenzie Price and her husband invited some kids in their neighborhood in Austin, Texas, to join her own kids to making a makeshift microschool. They began by running a program that had more intense academic sprints in the morning, followed by life skills after lunch. And this is a pretty common format for microschools and homeschool programs. And I've seen this in a variety of contexts. Without the same constraints of the classroom environment, much of the learning can be compressed into the morning. They grew the program eventually to about 90 students, K-8, and they found a permanent location. And then in the early 2020s, they partnered with an entrepreneur, Joe Limond, to build software tools to help glue together some of the off-the-shelf apps they were using. They attempted to do some single sign-on, put that behind a single login, and started pulling the data into dashboards to help track what was working and what wasn't, and how the kids were using as they iterated through different pieces of software. I learned most of this through an author who submitted an article to the Astral Codex blog of a parent at the school. He says they began to start seeing stronger academic results and expanded. In 2022, they really started their expansion by building a campus in Brownsville, Texas. So Brownsville is a community on the border with Mexico, and it's got a fairly low average income, but it's also home to SpaceX. So about 50% of the students in the school come from employees of SpaceX, and the other half are pulled from the local community. Now, keep in mind, this is still a private school, and tuition is $10,000 a year. So this is not exactly public, and they certainly don't have the same mandates as a public school, but it's an attempt to expand into a slightly different community. This last year, in 2024, Alpha continued to expand. They opened up 3 new campuses in Texas, focused on gifted and talented, which has a testing requirement, Sports Academy, and Next Gen Academy, where they do game programming. Supposedly, all these campuses have the same morning curriculum and just do different activities in the afternoon. They also opened up a campus in Miami, and this fall, 2025, they're planning to open up a bunch of new locations in New York, San Francisco, and all over the country. They've incorporated a parent company called 2 Hour Learning, which owns the Alpha schools as well as a bunch of other efforts that they're doing. I've seen that they are managing charter applications via Unbound Academy, where they've applied for charters in several states, Utah, Arkansas, North Carolina, South Carolina, and Pennsylvania. I think all those applications have been rejected or are still pending. Arizona has approved their application for a virtual charter school. They also have Novatio, which is a virtual private school for other states that can accept some state funding via vouchers. They are supposedly have an Alpha homeschool program they're taking interest in to let parents purchase it directly. And when I talked to them, they said that they have a program with Texas Prep Charter School in Texas. They're working on a documentary with that school. So they're just trying to spread it like crazy, and they're on a big outward push. The other thing that I've come across is the software side of the house. They have some relationship, I'm not exactly sure, with Trilogy Software and a couple of contractor firms. And there's a company called Studient that's selling their solution into public schools, but there's not a whole ton of information available about these online. Because they're making such a big PR blitz that covered in a lot of news articles about AI in education, I felt it was worth it to dive into their claims and better understand what's going on in the school. Is it really achieving these groundbreaking results that they're claiming?
You condense like a 6-hour normal school day into only 2 hours, and it's not like with a teacher standing in front of you. It's with an AI app that's personalized to skills that you need to learn in the grade level.
We don't need the whole day.
We do math, reading, language, and science. We work 30 minutes in each subject, and it's self-paced learning. So, for example, I'm in 6th grade, but I'm working in 7th grade math.
And as a result, our students are learning twice as fast as students in a traditional classroom.
So let's look at both sides of that claim. 2 hours a day, 2x the learning. Those are both pretty dramatic claims. They often compare 2 hours of learning compared to the 6.5 hours of a regular school day. And so let's start with the hours. What goes on during this school day? Is it that different from a regular school? So we see that their schedule is still about 6.5 hours. They start school around 8:45 and they get out at 3:30. So Astral Codex blog mentions, quote, "It isn't genuine 2-hour learning." He says most kids start school at 8:30 and they start working on the 2-hour platform sometime between 9 to 9:30, and they're occupied with academics until about 12:30 p.m. They have some surges that they blend in from time to time where they add more hours to the platform. So the 2 hours claim comes from active usage time.
The average is less than 2 hours a day. You see that some students are over 2 hours, but not one is over 3. Those students over 2 are either catching up or getting way ahead. This is where the crazy disbelief hits. How can they be learning so much and doing it in so little time?
I don't think it's directly comparable to a school day. I looked at my own kids' school schedule, and they have standard 1-hour blocks of academics, and they have about 4 hours of blocks for the basics, reading, math, science, and social studies, as well as time for lunch, recess, and extra time periods throughout the day. So there is maybe a little bit less time, maybe 2.5 to 3 hours at Alpha versus 4 hours officially scheduled, but I don't think that it's quite as dramatic of a difference as you might say. The big difference is what goes on during that time. And so I think that the reason they had this 2-hour learning tagline is because it draws attention to what they're actually spending their time doing. So what is the heart of the platform? They've composed a mix of mainly third-party tools, and it's not really AI in the current sense as we understand it through ChatGPT and generative AI. Instead, it's more of personalized learning and using software for teaching. So they change their platform every summer, every year, and so I'm sure they have different tools that they'll roll out in the year ahead. But roughly, for math, they're using a mix of iExcel and Math Academy. They also have Rocket Math and Fast Math tools to help kids learn their math facts really quickly. For reading, for the younger kids, they use a variety of pretty fantastic reading tools, Amira, Lalilo, and Project Read, and eGump. And they also have their own proprietary program. This is where the software comes in that they call Alpha Read. And according to this blog, it's pretty good. For language, they do teach foreign language. Their website at one point said they were using Duolingo, but when I spoke to them, they said that's not what they're using anymore. And then they also have writing programs that they call Alpha Write. And so they have a mix of proprietary and third-party tools that they're using. And supposedly it helps them weave the curriculum together, which is standard great practice in a good school program where you have science texts that maybe appear in the reading or they're writing about their social studies work. And that's all great. It's important to note what's not in their standard academic piece. They're not really incorporating the health curriculum or PE. Supposedly that's all part of the afternoon and getting out into the community. And so this is great. They've got a set of software tools and they're seeing academic results from it. So let's talk about those results. Then for the results, let's hear what Mackenzie Price says about the results.
We're going to use data from Alpha School, the flagship campus that first implemented 2-hour learning. At Alpha, we commit to parents that their child will learn twice as much in 2 hours per day as they would in 6 hours of traditional school.
So I want to talk about these 2x results. All of their results, they have a bunch of videos, articles, even their charter school applications, and they all point back to the main Alpha School website and the results section, which refers to this paper, the 2-hour learning white paper, which is entitled Welcome to the Future of Education. The core claims are based on 2 distinct concepts: student attainment and students' growth. So attainment just represents absolutely how high did the students score at a given time. They talk about their spring attainment on the NWEA MAP, And they also discuss the SAT attainment for high schoolers. And of course, in this case, the attainment is very high.
Our average SAT score is 1470. 90% of our students get 4s or 5s on APs.
Students at Alpha School typically score in the upper 90th, 99th, 98th percentile. Almost every grade scores very high compared to their peers around the country. And they talk about this. Students at Alpha score in the top 1% nationwide, etc. They don't talk about in this paper how those students were testing coming in. And so I think there are a lot of mitigating factors, in particular, $40,000 a year tuition, and the fact that this is an innovative new school model purposeful in a network of education entrepreneurs that might make this a skewed data set. So we're going to look at the growth measure, though. Growth is a measure of how a given student's score improved over the course of the year. And for that, SAT doesn't give them that. Only the NWEA MAP scores give them that. So what is the MAP test?
MAP growth is an assessment measuring achievement and growth in K-12 math, reading, language usage, and science, administered 2 or 3 times each school year. Its results help educators understand how their students are performing academically and how they're growing over time. Here's how MAP growth works. The test is adaptive, which means a student's test adjusts based on their responses. If a student gets a question right, the next question is harder. If a student gets a question wrong, the next question is easier. This means each student gets a personalized test experience designed to identify their achievement level, independent of their grade or age.
So we're going to get a little technical. And MAP is a great test, but it can be a little tricky. The key concept for MAP is that when students take the test for a given subject area, they get placed with a particular RIT score. These are supposed to be evenly spaced units of learning across the spectrum, ranging from kindergarten all the way to 12th grade. NWEA sets a target for each student about how many RIT points they're supposed to learn in a given year. That's called their projected growth. And then when the students take the test in the spring, they take the test first in the fall, that sets their projected growth, and in the spring, they take the test again, and that's their observed growth. And so the growth multiple would be observed divided by projected. We see, the Alpha School says, MAP is the third-party grader. At Alpha, these scores are always doubled. For example, looking at the student achievement percentiles for 2020, a 50th percentile fifth grader typically goes up 4 points in math over a year. That would be the projected growth. At Alpha, that student will go up 8 points. That would be the observed growth. And so they're kind of claiming that they'll double the RIT points. Okay, so it's a pretty simple concept. To back up this claim, they've shared 4 screenshots of the Alpha School summary report from the 2023 to 24 school year. So the results from the spring a year ago. And in their published results here, they've obscured all but 3 columns. And the 3 columns are the spring attainment, the growth, and the school growth percentile. So we talked about attainment, it's very high. For a school growth percentile, that tells us that compared to other schools that took this test, the Alpha students as a group scored very high on their growth numbers. Some grades are in the 99th percentile for growth. Some grades are in the 69th percentile. They're all above average, and they all did a great job on the growth numbers. So finally, though, the middle column here is labeled growth. But if we go underneath, and this was the surprising part to me, so we see that and this is the column where, so if you're looking at this here, we can see the middle column is labeled growth. And at the bottom, they really emphasize their core claim. For example, in the math scores, they say Alpha students are learning on average 2.47x faster. But what's crazy to me is when you look at this column, we can see the subheader here, observed growth SE. The SE is important. That stands for standard error. That means this column is not the observed growth multiple. It is, in fact, the observed growth standard error. Standard error is a statistical concept that relates to the variance of the data set. It is not a measure of growth. It's kind of bonkers. So the actual observed versus projected graph is right below. And so we can kind of eyeball it. We can see that and if you're just listening, there's a graph right below the chart that has these blue diamonds showing the projected growth, and then these gray bars that show the actual growth. And we can see, for example, the first grade. We can see that the projected growth is about 15 and the observed is maybe 20, and that is about a 1.3, about a 30% more than projected. Great growth. 1.3 would be the number there, but we can see in the growth SE column that for first grade it's listed as 3.2, like a bonkers high number. And when I average it all out across all of math, we get a 1.6 multiple, and across reading it's 1.3. And those are fantastic numbers, but they're not 2x. So what this does to me is it tells me that this is not a serious research paper, which we knew that because it's a marketing paper. We know this is put out by the company to advertise their product, and it's not third-party research. It's not put out by a university. It's not peer-reviewed. It's not published in a journal. And this error is pretty easy to catch because it's documented on the NWEA website about what this column means. I emailed all this, by the way, to Alpha School and asked them why they chose this column and what they had to say. And they emailed me back a link to this blog, not by Alpha School itself, but by Austin Scholar, which is a Alpha School student that runs a blog. And the author here has published the results of the latest school year, 2024 to 25. So we actually have the raw map scores. So they've showed us the link to the latest K-8 map scores from Alpha School. Great. And this time unobscured with all the columns. So we can see that there is an observed growth column, just like we should. And we can see that there's a observed growth SE column, a standard error, just like the other one. We can see that the number of students, there's about 14 kindergartners, 23 first graders. And so we can actually answer two key questions with this latest round of growth. But we can also see that the incoming attainment for all grades is very high, including for kindergarten. So for these students coming in at the kindergarten level, they are already in the fall testing at the 99th percentile. So that tells me that this population is highly skewed towards fantastic test takers. And these are students that are selected for whatever reason at the Alpha School office and campus. They're already selected to be very high attainment, and they are growing as a result of their program here, but they might be growing anyway due to their families, due to their circumstances, due to whatever. And I'm also able to calculate the observed versus projected growth for this last year. And again, this is just back of the envelope in Google Sheets. It looks like it's about a 1.7 multiple, which is better than the previous year, but still not 2x. Not that I just want to emphasize 1.7x is phenomenal NWEA map growth, but it just, it's not rising to the level that they're claiming in terms of all of their marketing. And so when compared to other schools, it's not quite as above the norm as may be claimed. And so this is not a controlled study that tells us these are working in different environments. And so this was really great. I appreciated looking into these, and I think that we need to ask this question that came, so why does this matter? Alpha School is a private school. They don't have to do a published study. Most private schools don't publish their data at all. So why is this important? Well, first of all, Alpha School is claiming 2x growth in 2 hours as a core part of their marketing brand. Second, they are using this data to push charter applications and public schools to adopt their program without the corresponding third-party research that justifies it. And they're using the wrong column even in their main white paper that's out there. I think that this question from the Astral Codex article is valid. He says, we know this program works for a specific type of kid. Let's find out how broadly it is applicable. Can it work for everyone? And I hope it does. I hope to learn about how they're using this. I will say a couple of things that the Alpha has nodded to try to justify how this works for a variety of kids. They've pointed repeatedly to their Brownsville location. So as I mentioned, Brownsville is 50% SpaceX employees and 50% local population in a high poverty area. Alpha, in their white paper, picked a single grade level, the second grade students at Brownsville, and showed that they went from low percentile attainment to high percentile attainment between fall to spring in a given year. But I've done enough marketing studies myself to be able to know how to cherry pick some data. And so in this case, I think, this is not a systemic study. I'd love to know what the other grade levels look like. And in particular, I'd love to know, how does the data look at other schools? They've now got 5 school locations for this last year. How does it look at all of them, not just their Alpha Austin location? I would particularly like to see them do the spring to spring adjustment rather than fall to spring. See the spring to spring. So how do they retain the information over the summer and over the course of a whole year? That is a gold standard for NWEA analysis, is to do a full year's worth of growth. And when you see other educational discussions about high-performing charter schools, etc., it's typically a full calendar year of testing, so they can tell how they're doing there. And I would love to see, most importantly, a truly impartial third-party validation of their data in a published paper, if they're going to be going off and talking about this. So the end of it is, I don't really know if Alpha School works. I know that it is a highly engaging school in Texas that's talking a lot about their program. I like a lot of what they're doing. I want to like this school. I want them to succeed because I love how iterative they're being. I love how they're incorporating different pieces of software. The software they're using typically has a lot of research to support its efficacy. But in the practice, the fact that their results are kind of so sloppily put together calls into question the whole thing for me. So I would love it if, as they do their analysis, they've just got this one blog currently with the latest results, but as they do their full analysis of the 2024 to 25 results, I'm hoping they can use the correct columns, do a full analysis, and hopefully get a third-party researcher that does it. They told me they have some in the works, and I'm looking forward to seeing those. So thanks all for tuning in, and we'll check back as we hear more about Alpha School.